Is a rare commodity when trying to assess the ongoing conflict in Syria. But what is clear is that after 4 years, the situation has a long way to go. According to the United Nations, millions are trapped in dire conditions. More than 12 million people need humanitarian assistance, about half of them children. On the battlefield, the US-backed rebel group Hazm dissolved following weeks of clashes with Al-Qaeda, a setback to Western efforts in the fight against jihadists. And there's this. Earlier this month, a United Nations proposal for a temporary ceasefire in the city of Aleppo was rejected by a group of opposition forces, arguing that it failed to offer a comprehensive solution, one that excludes President Bashar al-Assad and his government. Later, we'll talk with an advisor to the Syrian Minister of Information and a former advisor to the opposition. But first, some background. Here's CCTV's Natalie Coney.
Syria's civil war isn't just Syrian. The problems plaguing it have spilled into neighboring countries. More than a third of Syria's estimated 9 million refugees are here in Turkey. Complicating matters, international dissent over how to end the conflict in Syria, one of the principal breeding grounds for the Islamic State. The Turkish government blames Syrian President Bashar al-Assad for a civil conflict that spawned a regional scourge. The Islamic State fighters, who carved out a caliphate from 2 countries and want more territory.
Unfortunately, the picture has been very much complicated with the presence and the domination of ISIS. If we could have intervened, either politically or militarily, at the onset of the conflict, if we could have provided necessary assistance to what we call the legitimate opposition in Syria, probably we would avoid all these consequences that we didn't want to see. But unfortunately, the international community doesn't have a concrete plan for the settlement of this dispute.
Turkey says a no-fly zone and sending combat troops to Syria will win the fight, 2 options the U.S. refused to discuss until now. In early March, the U.S. announced it was now considering a U.S.-enforced no-fly zone or protected corridor in northern Syria. Allies Turkey and the U.S. have long been at odds about how to deal with the Syrian crisis, to the extent that some analysts are saying it's putting a strain in relations. While the U.S. is adamant about ridding the region of the threat of ISIL, Turkey wants to keep the focus on bringing down the government of Bashar al-Assad.
Syrian regime, who has been spoiled by an approach that as if they are now legitimate because of their fighting against Daesh. We should not allow regime to exploit the presence of Daesh and continue to attack against Aleppo. International community and all countries should fight against Daesh. But fighting against Daesh does not mean legitimizing a brutal regime.
It took 9 months for Turkey and the U.S. to negotiate the terms of a train and equipped program for moderate Syrian fighters. But one question remains: is the priority Islamic State or Assad?
Of course, we cannot talk with the ISIS, and you probably need to defeat it militarily. But even doing this will require a comprehensive, serious strategy.
Turkey is now hosting nearly half the 3.5 million Syrians that have fled the fighting. Ankara is concerned that the number of refugees could swell by another 2 million more if fighting continues in Aleppo, Syria's second biggest city. The other issue, what's flowing in the other direction. Foreign fighters slipping into Syria from Turkey. Around 20,000 foreigners have joined the ranks of Islamic State. By consensus, most have traveled through Turkey. Western officials complain Ankara isn't doing enough to stop this, but Turkey says it's doing plenty, which leaves it and its Western allies close to where they were at the start of this conflict, locked in a policy stalemate. Natalie Carney for CCTV in Istanbul, Turkey.
Reem